I thought maybe to start things off, we can start over here and go down the panel, just starting to get some of your initial thoughts about the issues raised in terms of confronting tomorrow's management. So perhaps, James, if we could start with you, and you could share some of your thoughts in terms of leading a global organization, in terms of how you think about managing the individuals that you not only work with you, but work with you and for you, given the global reach of your firm.
Well, Kevin, thank you, and it's great to be here, and it's been a wonderful program over the last night and today. You know, it's just a piece of cake. We've got 155,000 people in 140 different countries, and I have 9,000 partners who are all my bosses, I think. At least they think they are. A couple of them are here in the room. So it's really easy. No, look, when I think about your topic, tomorrow's management challenges, to me, this is going to be and going to continue to be a very complex world we're living in, a very tumultuous world we're living in. There are going to be winners and losers, whether that's at a company level or a country level or even at an individual level. I guess as I look around from meeting with our clients, talking to people, I think one of the biggest determinations of winning versus losing is, do you have the right mindset? Do you have the mindset, frankly, of an entrepreneur that Israel has in such abundant supply? You know, do you have, we did a survey in the depths of the recession and depths of the financial crisis. We asked a bunch of entrepreneurial businesses, a bunch of big mature companies, same battery of questions. What was stark is that at the same moment in history, in one case, the mature companies, less than 1 in 5, were looking for opportunities. They were all worried about protecting their backsides. And the entrepreneurs, 67%, were looking for opportunities. They were hurting, to be sure, but they thought maybe my competitor's hurting worse. And so I think having the mindset of an entrepreneur is vital. I think making sure that you couple that with a clear view of what's happening out in the world, the landscape we're all living in, the shift in capital, the different speeds of recovery, the challenges in Europe, the opportunities in the emerging markets, the slow growth in North America. So not just the shift in capital, but as you talked about from a talent perspective, the demographic shifts. Ages of populations are vitally important to understand, but I think just as important is to understand that the teams within Ernst & Young that all of our people are going to be on are going to be more diverse in the future than they've ever been in the past. Diverse around gender, around ethnicity, around nationality, religion, sexual orientation, you name the dimension, it's going to be more diverse. And our experience is that diverse teams rarely perform in the middle of the pack. They're either off the charts great or they're horrible. And it comes down to, do you have a culture among your teams that bring the best ideas from all different perspectives? And so, you know, if you've got that culture, magic happens, innovation sparks. If you don't have that culture, the best ideas stay inside the minds and inside the hearts of members of the team. It's disastrous. So I think having a real inclusive leadership culture is going to be vital to tomorrow's management.
Great, thank you. Perhaps, Professor Tischler, if we could turn to you. You've overseen a number of MBA programs and thought very much about some of the skills that need to be cultivated in some of the younger people today as they enter the workforce. If you can share your thoughts on how one nurtures those skills and what one needs in not only graduating from an MBA program, but thriving in the business community or in the broader community thereafter.
Thank you. Yeah, we struggle for this point because the question is, it's not difficult to finish an MBA, and that's not the right measure of success. The right measure of success is what our students are doing 5, 6, 7 years after they finish their MBA, and whether we help them to improve their position in their organizations or be entrepreneurs by themselves. So first of all, it was very difficult to convince professors in our school, and we are the largest school in Israel, that this is the right measure, because they think that getting good grades is the right measure, or having very high IQ is the right measure. I don't think so. I think the measure is what will your students do 5, 6, 7 years later? Whether this person will hire many of our top students, or Judith, or EMC school. Thank you. So I think that's the right measure. So it's a challenge for us. What should be the focus of the MBA program? Who to train? what to teach, because eventually managers' responsibilities include strategic management, financial issues, marketing, and so on and so forth, and it's not easy to do. So we decided probably a couple of years ago when we wrote the strategic program of our school. First of all, we are in Israel, and the focus is what do we do well in Israel? So we have to go on Israel's strength. Israel's strength is high-tech, biotechnology, clean tech. That's what we focus, number one. Number two, you have to also give some general knowledge, some general skills. And I think probably the most important thing that we should try to teach our students is that when they finish their classes with us, and most of them already work as managers, I think that's probably the most important point. We should have people with some experience. And so the most important thing is they get out there, and the very first minute they have to make decisions, that decisions about problems they never faced before. So the idea is we have to train people to go out of this school. They have to have vocabulary because they have to speak with him, they have to speak with her, and they have to speak with him. And that's by itself not easy to do because they speak a professional language. So vocabulary is important. Analytical skills are also important. Communication skills are also important, but probably the most important is take responsibility, tackle problems you never met before, and do it well. So if you understand that that's what is going to happen to you in the future, if we can help you, our students, to understand that you go out, you have problems you never met before, we cannot prepare you for this problem. Nevertheless, to do it well, we did well. And that's what we try to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Dr. Richter, as someone who has founded and led entrepreneurial organizations, who employs some of these people who come from schools and the like, let me ask, is that an accurate assessment of the skills that you expect for some of the new people that will work with you? And how do you think about harnessing some of this talent effectively?
I was thinking about preparing a lecture about the world and how it changes and so on, but following Professor Tischler, I would like to present how I see our culture, Israeli culture, as part of this changing workforce and the challenges that we are facing when we want to go global. Because it's very clear, and I believe most of the people would experience it very much easily with me, that our culture in Israel is that we want to solve problems. We get up in the morning and I can overcome every problem, and we are looking for them. So in some ways, how do we do it? We do it with it that we just invent something. Every day, something new. Then, when we go to manage our people, we speak what is the term very common, and we speak dugri, which means we speak directly. We tell them what to do. Now, another thing that we do, we have some kind of devotion to our organization. Why? Because everybody knows everybody. What does it mean? There is a lot of corridor talks, and you cannot change yourself. You go to your workforce, if you succeeded there, that's fine. If you did not succeed, everybody in the world knows. So you have to be very, very devoted and try to solve everything that you find to the best way. You are never anonymous. You don't go to work in an organization that have 200,000 people or whatever, like was presented here. Now, another thing that really somehow epitomized the environment in Israel, that we have exposure to multidisciplinary technologies. It's every time that you need something, you can go to your next door neighbor or meet a friend of yours and just ask him. In Israel, there is also the notion of, instead of 7 degrees of separation, that usually you would say that in the world when you meet someone, it takes 7 degrees to meet. In Israel, it's the most is 2 degrees of separation. Immediately you meet someone, he or she knows somebody else. So there's a fantastic accessibility to knowledge. I can tell you from us that we don't have to go when we invent something to try it in some other state. We can do everything in Israel, which is also part of the vibrant academic life, which is somehow integrated globally. Sometimes the level here is not so high, but we can work with others. So now, with all this familiarity of our life here, there's the question if we want to grow and we want to go further, we have to go globally. And the question is how much our culture fits the needs of the world and how much we can go. I'll be happy to speak about it later, but the major question then would be, do we follow an idea or do we follow culture?
Very interesting question. Mr. Governor, if you can perhaps comment not only on this thought about Israeli culture, not only perhaps on some of the ideas around MBAs and the skills they need, but more broadly from the perspective of your organization, how you think about harnessing and managing talent.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. And first, it's a pleasure to be back in Israel again. I think this is my 54th trip to Israel. So thank you. So I'm curious at what point I'm actually a citizen or a resident, but I'm not sure if your taxes are better or worse than ours, but worse, okay. I'm not a resident, okay. And I'm also very pleased that just because we have found EMC and VMware, we have found such success here. And part of my visit here is visiting Extreme.io, our latest acquisition, to become part of the EMC family. And now we're crossing over 1,000 employees here in Israel, and quite excited about the opportunities for us going forward. As we think about this topic of management and how we organize and manage our teams as we look to the future, of course, as a technology company, we think about that first through the lens of technology and the rapid change, if not violent change, that technology is bringing upon us. And a new word for you today is SOMO-CLOBID. In this, I summarize the major technology trends that are going on. You can tell it to your spouse tonight. SOMO-CLOBID, right? Social, mobile, cloud, and big data, right? SOMO-CLOBID. And these to us are these dramatic changes that are occurring. We would have thought about the internet before. Now that's given way to these technology forces that are driving just dramatic change. It leads us that our teams are no longer organization into very hierarchical command and control structures with specific and strict MBOs and orderly processes, but it's become far more 7x24 globally distributed teams, and those teams are no longer working in the ways that we would have worked before, and now it's this environment where they're largely driven by vision and culture. They want to work at a place that is doing something that they're excited about, a hard problem, that is motivating them, but they also want to work at a place that is cool, that's hip, and also one that is good, in the sense that it's good for the society, it's good for the environment, it's good for the community, and it's also working on good things. And this changes very much how you motivate employees, how you organize teams, and how you work together on a global basis. And as a result of that, it causes us as managers and leaders and executives to have to think entirely differently about how we organize global projects and global teams, And yes, you need to have somebody who's in charge and accountable, but their leadership needs to become one driven by social, 7x24, this connectedness to a global world, but to set clearly a vision that motivates that team so they know what to do even when nobody is there saying what to do, because they know the vision that they're trying to accomplish, and they know how to do it because of the culture and the environment that they're participating in. It also becomes increasingly critical for us to continue to skill and reskill those workforces. And to us, that becomes an increasingly challenging assignment. And one of the topics I mentioned was big data, what that means, in this world, is a great topic which we could spend an hour on, not the subject of this panel. But if we think about just this idea of big data and a very hot area for us today, it's a new skill area. 35 years ago, there was nothing called computer science. And today, computer science is taught in every quality institution in the world, That's not very long that an entirely new field has emerged and become common to the entire high-tech industry. Today, we think of big data as the next big field that will emerge, and data science replacing computer science as the hot new place to be. And thus, we need to be skilling, reskilling, and very rapidly transforming our workforce. And if we don't, we know that competitors will. and these are emerging very, very rapidly in our world. I was just speaking to an employee that we were trying, or a recruit that we were trying to hire, and we were competing against Facebook or a startup. And the phrase that came out of his mouth just astounded me. He said, Facebook is really pretty old school. And that's what I'm competing with to get the best and the brightest as part of our company. Thank you.
No, it was interesting. I was just reflecting on how an accounting firm could be cool and hip. I don't know. No, what I was actually thinking about was, I guess what I was actually thinking about was, you know, when Judith was talking, she was talking about, you know, the Israeli culture and how strong and powerful that is, and how, you know, there's so many positive elements. And I was reflecting on a dinner I had last night with a woman who is the leader of a group called Birthright, which is, you know, many of you know it quite well. It brings Jews from around the world to experience the culture here in Israel. And at dinner, we were actually talking about it's also important to get, you know, Israeli citizens to experience cultures outside of Israel, not to change the culture, but to experience the fact that the world is much beyond, and to actually, you know, open the horizons even more broadly to exactly capitalize on what you were talking about. And so it was a fascinating discussion we had at dinner last night.
Just to support what you said, I just read an article in which research was reported that citizens of Israel that are working in the Silicon Valley and that adapted somehow the values and code of behavior there have proven to be much more creative. So definitely identifying yourself with two national ways, it's really supportive for the organization. The question is how you then bring them back, and that's another problem in Israel. But it raises another issue that I wanted to bring up, because I'm taking the voice of being an Israeli. We hear a lot about inventiveness, and we hear a lot of startups coming up. And in Israel, there is recently quite criticism about why small startups are being already sold out and they are leaving the country. And I think that we in Israel, when we develop managers, we have to consider what is the value that we are, or what is the value system that we are putting in front of them. And I want to be a little bit somehow criticizing the thing that we are hearing now, that if you sell the company when it's very small, you are doing bad to your own country, you are doing bad to yourself because you could grow it. And I think that we have to realize that in Israel we are very, very really creative and inventive. But why not be champions of inventions? Why not focus only on what we know very well? And why should we go further and expect ourselves to be global and go further and further? Why not manage some sizable companies here instead of trying to compete and make companies that are global and in huge sizes? And that's another thing that I wanted to be considered when we speak about our managerial skills. I think we should be focusing on supporting the creativity here and less the business imperialism. So the question is, how do you support creativity here? And you know, part of my problem as a CEO is that definitely the people who report to me know better than I do, because very easily all information is very accessible. And in a very short time, they can even create information, which I even didn't ask for. So my biggest challenge would be as a CEO to be capable of judging the people. But if they have the information and I don't, so how can I judge the validity and reliability of the information? So it goes back to the old world, before the technology was there, and asking the manager to be as special kind of human being, which knows not only to choose the right person to report to him or her, because he doesn't have the time to judge the quality of the information that he gets, but he or she has to have another characteristic which is very important, is to motivate the people.